Pop-O-Holics. Welcome to Pop-O-Holics, the show about hot takes, hotter than pancakes. But we're a couple of lovers on the lam, just lambing around. If this is your first time, welcome to the show. This is the show where we talk about all things pop culture. We theme our months and we talk about something centering a release or an event or just anything we want. We do what we want here. This week's episode is following an ending, closing our double feature, double month, Volume 1, Volume 2, Tarantino talk, centered around Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, in which you can check out our previous episode where we review that film. We are closing it out with one of my favorite movies of all time, True Romance. Very exciting. We'll get to that a bit later. Before that, we're going to talk about news. We're going to talk about what we've been consuming for the week, our weekly poll, and move on into the main topic. But it's not just me here blabbering on. I'm joined, as always, with two of my favorite co-hosts.
Chris Conkling.
And Brian Dupree.
How are you guys doing? So good to be back here.
Doing great.
I am just happy to not have to smell your feet.
Yeah, I worked.
Do you want to add some context to that, Brian? I don't.
I worked the equivalent of a double in the, pulled a hard day's work here. Had a meeting early on in the morning, then worked a full shift at my job. So I'm very tired, and I put up my feet as we're recording this episode. Sorry if I sound a bit down. I'm very tired, and my feet smell just horrible. So listeners, if you close your eyes, imagine how bad feet can smell. You're not even close. Not even close to the stank that's going on right now. Okay, no one wants to hear about my feet. We've already done too much time on something so disgusting. So we're going to move on first into Brian's Wacky News Corner.
Okay, guys, welcome back. We've got a bit of disappointing news to start off today. Many of you probably have heard at this point, but Sony and Disney have broken down their negotiations to keep Spider-Man in the MCU.
Oh, no, but Spider-Man. But Disney does this Spider-Man so good. Okay, go ahead. That's my feelings on it.
I know you're actually angrier than this reaction. You have to be, because these last few movies have been so good. Some of the best Marvel content, in my opinion. And yeah, so I don't know how much you guys have dug into the details on this. This is the most I've learned about distribution and production stuff in probably since we started the podcast. First dollar gross. I did not know what this term meant. Apparently, the previous deal was that Disney would get 5% of the first day of gross profits, which I guess is kind of atypical, and it's kind of only done in the U.S. where a lot of times producers will get their money back after you start making a profit on the movie. So Disney was pushing for seemingly 50% of first day profits, and I haven't seen these numbers particularly confirmed by either studio. I don't know if you guys have.
They haven't released any type of official statement from either of them in terms of how the negotiations actually went down behind the scenes. Everything that we've gotten has been from Hollywood Reporter or Deadline.
Okay.
The 50%, I believe, was also a co-financing deal. So they wanted 50%. So they would basically pay for half of the movie, and then on top of that, 50% of the day one grosses, which I don't know.
Seems pretty fair to me in terms of how they've turned the Spider-Man IP around.
Yeah, I agree. 50% is a huge leap from 5%, though. So I can see
it definitely is.
I can see why Sony was like, hell no. No way. Thanks for the help, but we'll take it from here.
Yep.
But yeah, I think both parties are very stupid to let negotiations break down, because honestly, this franchise makes both parties a ton of money.
Definitely. And it makes a lot more sense why we didn't get any Spider-Man announcements with any of the recent Marvel stuff, right? Because I guess this stuff has been going on behind closed doors for a while. But that also gives me hope that maybe we have some time for this negotiation to work itself out, even though Feige has come out and said it was never going to last forever, which I'm not sure exactly what that means. But
I think there he's just referencing the original 5% deal. It was finite, right? They knew it was coming to a close.
Sure.
So there was going to have to be renegotiations at some point to make sure that Spidey stayed in the MCU, or they figured out what they wanted to do, what they wanted to change. Everything that I've heard from Feige so far, I think is basically him just like towing the company line. You know, trying to be as political as he possibly can be, because nothing behind the scenes is like set in stone. They're still kind of trying to figure it out. And honestly, like, this really isn't something that the general public should have been privy to anyway.
Yeah, who do you think leaked it? Do you think Sony's the one who leaked it? No, this came out pretty... The cynic in me thinks that Disney knew what they were doing. They played the fans against Sony.
It's very possible.
Yeah, they're
The House of Mouse.
swinging that big mouse finger around.
That's definitely where you were going. The memes coming out of this have been absolutely impeccable, I will say. If for the memes alone, I'm happy this news got out, because, I'm selfish.
Yeah.
If the rest of the Spider-Man movies we get with Tom Holland are garbage, Brian, at least we have the memes.
And we'll get to see Uncle Ben die another time.
Oh, God.
So, everyone's been looking forward to that.
I really have two minds. The first mind is that they'll negotiate and they'll figure it out, because it's making too much money for everybody for them to not do it. But then again, Sony can put out any Spider-Man thing. It'll probably sell, The Amazing Spider-Mans at least made their money back, They weren't good.
Venom did well.
Venom did very well. Who doesn't want to see, those two collide on the big screen? That's going to make a ton of money. They know they can make a ton of money. But I do think they'll figure it out. And then it'll announce for the reuniting. And then we have a whole thing of like, thank God. Oh, my God. Thank God Disney's going to save us again.
Definitely
save our little
like
nerd hearts.
Yeah. This is going to be like a James Gunn situation, I feel, where we're all brokenhearted and angry. Yeah. Just wait it out, guys. That's my advice.
And
just
then they'll be on a 70-30. They'll end up having Disney will pitch in 50% and take 30 or whatever is going to happen.
Yeah,
right.
We'll see.
It'll make sense for all parties involved. And the second thing is, I don't want Disney to own everything. Listen, I'm a fan of a lot of the stuff Marvel's doing, but sometimes it's like it's very one singular vision, because they're doing the whole universe thing. I want new, like, if the MCU was doing their thing, we would have never got Tobey Spider-Man, right? If the MCU was just doing the thing, we never got weird things like Blade and Spawn, right? And so there's like, we never got Logan. Now that, Logan will never come out now that Disney owns the rights. We will never get anything like that. And not saying that I want another bloody Wolverine movie. I have that. It's great. I don't need a rated R Spider-Man. I don't need that. That's not really what I'm going towards. What I'm going towards is like, I want stuff that's outside the singular vision that keeps everything super milquetoast.
Yeah, you want unique perspectives. And, when this news originally dropped, a lot of the fans were very silly, and they were like, Disney should buy Sony. But, like, that's
the answer to everything.
That's not going to happen. Like, the U.S. government won't let that happen. Like, Disney is already dangerously close to being a monopoly. That it just will not happen. Even if Disney wanted to buy Sony, and Sony was like, sure, why the F not? It wouldn't take place, guaranteed.
Yeah,
that's my hot take on that.
I'm for all. Like, if after I was very satisfied with Endgame, if Marvel would have come out, Disney would have come out and said, you know what, we're done. We had a great run. We had some great characters. Maybe we'll reboot it in a few years, but that's it for the MCU. I would be so relieved that money was going to different projects and stuff. I know people are very passionate about it, but just let it end on a great. That was the best note. It's never hitting Endgame again, and maybe I'll eat my foot, and maybe I'm wrong, but I really don't think it's hitting as good as Endgame. And I think the Russo brothers are done with the MCU. I think the best of the MCU is done unless they keep pushing themselves to keep being creative. But that's just my 2 cents. I'm not too butthurt about all this. Any final thoughts on that?
That being said, I'm getting Disney Plus for these shows, guys. I'm still
Me
doing
too.
it.
Dude, She-Hulk and Moon Knight. Oh my God.
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about the Mandalorian. I'm not sure that any with a main character
man.
that
Looks so good.
It looks so good. That character who emotes so well with that mask on the entire time.
You know that helmet's gonna come off. They just don't want to show that in any of the trailer footage.
Oh God, I need that helmet to come off.
They actually still haven't cast anyone for it, so
Yeah, that's what I'm
there's
saying.
no one
They're
under
just
that
sitting on
mask.
it. Yeah,
Yeah, they filmed the entire thing, but they haven't actually cast the main.
they're gonna do the Master Chief thing
Brilliant.
where he puts his helmet. I don't know if you guys aren't as familiar with the Halo
Dude, the
series.
Mandalorian is all of us.
I guarantee you that the movie, the show either begins or ends. Putting my foot down. This is Christian's crazy prediction. That show ends with him taking his helmet off, and the shot ends on just the helmet and like panning out and then cutting to black before we see his face.
Oh my god.
That would be miserable.
Yeah, they're gonna do that. That's what's gonna happen.
Right, of
So,
course.
as
yeah.
smooth the transition as possible, speaking of viral marketing campaigns, Netflix has accidentally, in strong quotes, released an announcement for a Breaking Bad movie, which has long been speculated / hinted at by some of the cast and creators. But this is El Camino, a Breaking Bad movie, which centers around Jesse Pinkman, much loved, much acclaimed character, won a few Emmys from what I understand. I am not as excited as you guys probably are. I haven't watched all of Breaking Bad, which
Neither
I
have
probably
I,
have
Brian.
talked about. Okay, all right. So Christian,
Christian's
can you
probably
give us
most
some potential excitement here on this?
No, not really, because I'd be spoiling the end of Breaking Bad. So I'll leave it at.
I think everyone knows already.
I
but
think Jesse Pinkman is an interesting spot to. He was kind of at this apex of his character arc, and it does leave room for new interesting things. I personally have not seen a ton of Better Call Saul, so I still need to work up to that. This is one of those. Breaking Bad is pretty great, and it's great in its entirety. I would be good if they never made anything else, but I hear Better Call Saul is good. So
Better Call Saul is also prequel, right?
It is, and it doesn't deal directly with. I think there's actually not a whole lot that has to deal with the events of Breaking Bad.
my understanding is that though they're getting up, I think the next season is going to push right up into the Breaking Bad time frame, if I understood what I was reading correctly.
Very cool.
Yeah, I'd be down to rewatch Breaking Bad with you. I started to rewatch it and got halfway through the first season, and it was really good. But other stuff came up. But I would be down to do a rewatch of. I personally would rather just rewatch Breaking Bad. But you know, if it's good, it's good. You know, and a movie is much more digestible than I'm looking at Better Call Saul. They're in several seasons deep now, and so a movie would be a much easier digestion, and I think it'd be interesting. But I'd probably want to rewatch Breaking Bad. So if that's if we get I guess. October is supposed to be, so we don't have enough time to plan an event around this.
October 11th. It's sneaking up.
This is just happening, I guess. So prepare yourself. Catch up on Breaking Bad, maybe. I'll be able to talk about it.
El Camino. October 11th, 2019. We'll see if that date holds. All right. So aside from that, a couple other Netflix releases. We've got Dave Chappelle's newest special, about a year and a half since he dropped 2 on us after a very long break in between his previous special. And this one's called Sticks and Stones. I'm not sure if they put out anything besides the teaser trailer voiced by Morgan Freeman, which was pretty hilarious. You know, it's hard to go wrong with a Morgan Freeman voiceover. But I can't imagine that this won't touch on how fragile people are presented as today. And Dave Chappelle, he's known for pushing the boundaries of what's acceptable, saying kind of radical things that may or may not be true. Even if I don't always agree with him, always looking forward to hearing what he has to say and how he has to say it. I know you guys are excited about this as well.
Oh, yeah. And by the time you guys are listening to this episode, loyal listeners, it's already out. It came out Monday. So if you haven't yet and you're a fan of Dave Chappelle, go out and watch it.
I'm sure
but
we'll be talking about
finish
it
this
next
episode
week.
first and then go watch it.
I'm excited for this. Dave Chappelle rarely disappoints, even in his what I'd consider misses of his career. They're still better than most other specials you can find on Netflix. You guys know where I stand on this. I'm okay with comedians going into places that we cannot in our daily lives, and having a point of view about certain things and talking about things that are hard to talk about. And I think Chappelle has always done it with even the stuff that's been a little on the edge. I know the big thing was he has a story about a trans woman in his last special that got him a lot of heat. And, I listened to it. I was like, I don't know. It's kind of just about the reality of how that is. And it didn't seem like it came from a place of hate, more of a place of and I think that's always the important thing. If it's just bashing somebody for their lifestyle and just making fun of them, I can understand that, but it really wasn't that. I mean, it's a humorous story about someone like Dave Chappelle, an older man, kind of dealing with the world around us and that being a part of it. So I didn't see, but I'm also not a member of the trans community. So I do have friends that are trans, but I didn't ask them about this, and I don't know if they got up in arms. I think it's just I think a lot of this is like fake controversy, but I don't know.
Maybe after we watch it, we can dig into his last few specials, because that wasn't particularly what I was referencing, but I know that did get a lot of traction.
I thought that was like the big thing. I thought that was like
I think that was the I think
Okay.
that was the big thing,
Yeah,
for sure. But maybe we can get into a bonus episode at some point about free, because
definitely.
I think, like you said, like comedians are kind of on this edge of free speech, and I generally agree with you that they got to be the ones who push the boundaries, because someone has to on some level.
Mhm.
And it's
Yeah.
gotten to a point where I don't want to get into political stuff, but people are digging 10, 15 years into people's past when they're teenagers and calling them out for things, and everything is permanent today. So it leads to a lot of interesting questions.
Yeah, and if you don't have to go too far back in my past. You can probably go back to the last episode and find stupid stuff that I said that I regret, maybe don't agree with. So just gonna put those feelers out there and say that I'm not a perfect person, but I've always tried to be true and honest to myself. Hopefully, you can do that as well. I'm not above saying that I was wrong. You can. I think that's the most important thing, when people can admit they're wrong. I think that's the important thing.
Oh, for sure. Change is possible.
Now,
And-
Dave Chappelle himself, I believe, faced with his criticism, said, "I don't care what you have to say."
Yeah,
And,
no.
like his following special had a bit about people getting upset, which I thought was handled really tactfully. The guy's a genius. So
Oh, no doubt, no doubt. So, last piece of news, I know we're running a little bit long for this segment here, is a Netflix show that will be out Friday, August 30th. And this is a prequel TV series to the 1982 movie The Dark Crystal. And this is called The Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. I don't know if you guys have seen this movie. Only last year I saw it at one of our local Tampa theaters for the first time. This is one of the first Jim Henson movies that was non-Muppets prior to him doing Labyrinth. And the movie's amazing. I think there's been a couple different cuts. I think originally it didn't have a voiceover, and then the version I saw did have a voiceover, because a lot of it was originally implied and people just weren't getting what was going on a lot. So I saw it with the voiceover, so I can't speak to the original, but the puppet work is obviously genius. The story, just as with Labyrinth, is surprisingly dark and kind of occult. Like the basic storyline is that the universe is kind of out of balance because there are this group of shards that the part of a crystal is broken up and one of the shards is missing. So our main character is trying to reunite this shard, and there's a group of evil beings who are in control now because of this, and it's kind of just this adventure story about him trying to bring balance to the universe, very Star Wars. And
Right.
this show is a prequel that is 10 episodes, and it's got some pretty big names attached to it. Taron Egerton, Anya Taylor-Joy, Natalie Emmanuel from Game of Thrones, which I'm not big into Game of Thrones. I'm not sure what character she played. Helena Bonham Carter, Mark Hamill, Simon Pegg, Awkwafina. So star-studded voice cast here. I am very excited for this show.
Me too. I've only seen The Dark Crystal once, but I've been following this story for quite some time, and hearing that cast, it just gets me super pumped about watching this.
I can't remember if I've seen The Dark Crystal. I don't think that I have. If I was to say, I don't love Labyrinth. Is it a lot like Labyrinth?
I don't think it's a lot like Labyrinth,
No,
really.
it's all puppets too, so there aren't any live actors.
Yeah. I mean, I need to give it a chance. I think my brain right now, I think my vibe is like really not with fantasy at the moment. I think there's something weird. Maybe it's the overindulgence of superhero and comic book movies that have come out in the last, my entire like adulthood at this point. And so maybe I'm looking for something more grounded or something a little more gritty sci-fi.
This will not be that.
Definitely
Yeah,
not.
this is the antithesis of what you're looking for right now, Christian.
Oh no. I do want to give it a shot. I feel like Henson is a genius, and it can't be understated. His influence on pop culture, and the Muppets, such an influential thing in my life. I mean, it's really, he's really just a visionary, way ahead of his time on all those things. So I feel like I need to give it a chance, but I can't say that I'm excited for this because I really don't know much about The Dark Crystal. I do know I don't like Labyrinth. Did I say that earlier?
You did, yeah.
You did,
Labyrinth
you
is.
did.
I don't
Really
love-
driving that point home.
Yeah, Labyrinth is.
What about David Bowie, though? Come on.
I don't
Can't
really
dislike
love David Bowie. I like.
All right, there it is. Hot takes.
I think David Bowie's a very creative person, and I know a lot of people are
Visionary,
big fans of him.
genius, garbage.
No, it's more one of those things where I respect. It's like that. I respect
Sure.
a lot of things he was going for. I just don't think he was the complete package for me. It wasn't. But I'm not gonna crap on Bowie. I don't think. And again, I don't think Bowie's bad in Labyrinth. Bowie's exactly what Labyrinth is demanding of him. It's just not my cup of weird tea. I like weird
it is
movies.
Some weird tea.
As
Yeah.
we'll discuss later with True Romance, I really like
Yeah.
strange things sometimes. I do not like this blend of strange. So that's the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance coming to Netflix this month, right? No,
Yes,
yeah,
Friday the 30th.
Yeah, next
Friday.
week.
Wow. Coming up. Kids, got stuff to watch. Binge it. Netflix, binge it. I feel like that should be the tagline of Netflix. Netflix, boom, binge it.
Don't go outside.
Yeah, don't do anything today. Call out of work. Watch Netflix. Brian, thank you so much for bringing us that wacky news corner. Extra wacky this week. We're going to be moving on into what we've been consuming with our quick hits. So let me start things off. I'm going to talk about an old movie, very close in proximity to the movie we'll be talking about later as far as the year that it came out. This was a movie that I've been waiting to watch and just waiting for the right moment. And the right moment is it's on Netflix. Man, they are not. This is not sponsored content. It is streaming on Netflix right now. It came out in 1993, and it is Tombstone, starring Kurt Russell, Val Kilmer, Sam Elliott, and lots more. Directed by Kevin Jarre, who was kicked off the set after a week, and then directed by George P. Cosmatos of Mandy, the father of the director of Mandy, paleontologist Cosmopolitan, and
Oh my God, still can't nail the name.
and this movie is a hot mess, but it's a classic for a reason. It's one of my favorite Val Kilmer performances. Have you guys seen Tombstone?
I have never seen Tombstone. Ever.
No, I haven't
What
either,
about you, Brian?
unfortunately. No.
I'd say it's like
But now that it's on Netflix, I mean, why not?
it is a B movie. It's a little too long. It's a little disparate towards the end. Come to find out in doing more research, this must have been what is apparent is that it was a mess of a production, and I think that is definitely apparent when you're watching it. Although it still kind of holds together and is kind of a classic bro-y Western movie. And the performances carry the whole thing. Yeah, it turns out that George Cosmatos did not actually direct it very much. It was Kurt Russell who directed it. He had a deal. Kurt Russell had a deal where he's like, I won't talk about it until you're dead, bro. And then after he died, he's like, hey, I kind of directed that entire movie because he was kind of a gun for hire and didn't know the material as well as Kurt Russell did. And Kurt Russell planned a lot of it. But it does feel like a weird amalgamation, but damn, I mean, this is not a new opinion. If you've learned anything about Tombstone, Val Kilmer is the star of this, and he plays the eccentric Georgian gentleman he's like an Oscar Wilde type character. He has a very, very Savannah, Georgia accent, and he's all weird. Let me break this down. There's a scene in which he's sweating because his character is dying of tuberculosis, and one character looks at him and says something to the effect of, "Are you you're not okay?" And he's like, "I'm in my prime," and that's.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, there's a scene in which he starts speaking Latin with one of the villains, and he's like, "In vina veritas," which means in wine truth. It's so amazing. He's worth every second of it, and I do think it actually becomes a very touching movie. It is way too long. It is a flawed movie. But it is definitely worth rewatching. If you have never seen it, watch it for the first time. If you're in for a fun kind of bro-y, well-acted Western that's a little bit of a chaotic mess, I think you'll enjoy it. So it is streaming on Netflix, so it is definitely worth watching. That is Tombstone, now streaming on Netflix. Brian, what have you been watching?
So I was actually lucky enough to see a screening in IMAX of the final cut of Apocalypse Now, which is the 1979 Francis Ford Coppola Vietnam movie, which I'm going to go ahead and say is probably very historically inaccurate. I don't think this movie is very much about Vietnam as much as it is about war in general, although maybe it's about Vietnam. It's just kind of a chaotic thing. This movie stars Martin Sheen. Harrison Ford's got a weird 3-minute cameo.
He's got a
in it.
cameo.
Which, he's fine. But Martin Sheen is very much the star of this movie. Similar to what you were saying about Tombstone, Christian, I think this movie is a little long, and maybe this is the cut. I watched this in high school. I'm watching it this time, and I'm like, I don't know how my teacher. I had a conservative Baptist teacher who showed us this movie when we read Heart of Darkness, and I was like, how in the hell did we watch this movie in high school, junior year? So I was very
Maybe it was
surprised
a different
by that.
cut.
It must have been edited somehow, but maybe not. This movie, it's undeniably a classic. It's got some absolutely incredible sequences. It starts off with the Doors song "The End" playing over some incredible flashbacks of bombings in a warscape. It's got some stuff that will absolutely stick with you. And this was only the second time I had seen it, so it was fairly fresh to me because it's been, over a decade since I had seen it previously. And Chris, I had talked about this a little bit off screen, or off mic, but this was one of the last movies, as I understand, that actually had an animal slaughtered on screen. And without giving away plot, there's a bull that's slaughtered at some point by some native people in Cambodia. And I was just reading about it before the recording, and apparently this was an actual ritual slaughter that was going to happen regardless, that they just decided to shoot. I'm not sure, Chris, you're
That's
nodding.
crazy.
He's like,
That's so
it
crazy.
was, and my coworker had told me about this beforehand, and watching it is absolutely horrifying. You see everything, and the person slices into the back of its neck 2 times, and the blade is so sharp and it's so visceral. And this movie, intellectually, I don't think it really says as much as it potentially could. It kind of falls apart a little bit when you try and think about what it's trying to say, but it's absolutely worthwhile, and it's got some of the most iconic sequences. There's a general who just likes to get his bombings done early so he can surf in Vietnam, which is just absolutely absurd, but hilarious. And it's like, that's in this movie. So yeah, that's Apocalypse Now, the final cut. AMC was doing some screenings of it. I don't think they're happening anymore, and it's unfortunately not streaming anywhere as far as I could tell.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to watch Apocalypse Now when I was in school. It was in one of my film classes, and I watched it in a movie theater, setting, and it was incredible. It was really one of the best ways to watch that movie. Especially, you're drawn in from the opening scene. I mean, you're sold on the mood and everything, and the Doors song. And I was really into the Doors at that time, so it was extra cool. I think the movie's just about different perspectives on war. And it really breaks down into, the humanity of it, which is a very classic war trope. And I think it does it in a really fresh perspective, even looking back at it now. Where I think the movie can lose you for sure, and I know it lost me in the past, and I think it's one of those things where I'd rewatch it and go like, either have like, yeah, I was right, this is pretty over the top, or, oh, this is actually brilliant, which is Orson Welles', the last third of the movie, which is like a nightmare, which is either really boring or really, it's Orson Welles, right? Not Orson.
Marlon Brando.
Marlon Brando. Oh, excuse me.
Brando.
Yeah,
Marlon
I,
Brando.
as soon as it came out of my mouth, I was like, that isn't the right time. Different actor. Marlon Brando's performance at the end and the whole sequence with Charlie Sheen, or Martin Sheen. Just throw. I've never seen the movie. No, with Martin Sheen at the end. It's a very like.
I mean, he is a Sheen. Like
it kind of like
right.
it kind of devolves into a very like visceral experience that is much less dialogue and plot driven and more like inhuman. It's very like a kind of out there ending, classically, and it may go on a little too long. And maybe a little much for people. I think that's where you're either for or against Apocalypse Now. What do you think of that last third, Brian?
No, yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you're saying. I will say Dennis Hopper just showing up and being this like crazed cult hippie is kind of great. Feels like he's in a different movie a little bit, but his performance is really good, and it's very, very Dennis Hopper. But yeah, it could probably have been 15 minutes shorter and been just as effective.
Yeah, it is.
Speaking of Dennis Hopper.
Ayo.
He's in the movie we're watching tonight.
Thanks, Chris.
Papa Dennis.
I was gonna say last thing on Apocalypse Now. It is this like combination of like 70s filmmaking and then that counterculture era from the late 60s kind of meeting in a war film, which is interesting to see. Kind of and Dennis Hopper's definitely from like Easy Rider and stuff is like indicative of that whole time, and it's interesting to see a war movie, and it is an explanation of like kind of what the whole culture was going through in combination with war and counterculture and stuff. So Apocalypse Now, good movie. Hot take.
Yeah. And Christian, I think you and I had very similar experiences. I think we saw it with the same teacher, maybe not in the same class. but
Eric?
definitely the same. Yes, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, that man put me in my place when I was a kid. Shout out to you,
Same.
Eric. Teaching film at State College, doing the Lord's work. I do appreciate him as a human. I'm not going to go on.
Me
Eric
too.
much,
Me too.
But a good teacher. One of the most memorable teachers that we had. We took screenwriting with him together, right?
We did. Yeah.
Good for you, Eric. I wonder what he's up to. Eric, if you're out there, if you're listening to a podcast, reach out. We'll have you on the show. You can talk about Blade Runner. I know you like that movie a lot more than I do.
I'm so down. So I know we're running long here, but just quick take. We brought this up last week. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, the movie that is based on the classic Alvin Schwartz short story series. I really enjoyed this movie. I feel like it's a kind of a middle of the road PG-13, high school kids getting into hijinks type thing. Very reminiscent of the classic 80s movies, I had recently watched It Chapter 1, so got some vibes like that. But all in all, I thought this was really fun. I liked how they incorporated all the different stories into, without giving any spoilers away, they find a book where a lot of these stories are written, and it's kind of a weird plot device where there's a haunted house as well as this book who, I'm not going to say who writes the stories or is currently writing the stories, but it's a pretty cool plot device that allows them to tie in everything that's happening around them with this historical source material. And it interestingly sprinkles in a little bit of local government family conspiracy stuff towards the end. So acting performances are super solid. No one that I recognize from other things, but I imagine that they'll be probably sparking some careers with this one.
Yeah, this will probably springboard them. Very cool.
Yeah, so that's still in theaters right now. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, the Guillermo del Toro produced PG-13 horror movie.
God, I'm so jealous of all. It must be nice to be single, Brian. You get to see all these movies. Just go out and be like, I'm gonna go see a
Pros
movie.
and cons.
And have the A-list. He also has
Enjoy
A-list.
it, dude. God, that's be all. Yeah, I love my girlfriend. Say it again. I say it every podcast. But sometimes you tell me stories about being single and just being like, I don't know, I went to go see a movie. I saw 3 movies in one day. It's like whatever. After work, I was like, I'm just gonna go see some movies. Anyway, if you're single out there, enjoy it as much as Brian does. Anyway, that's what we've been consuming. That's Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. If you're single, go see it. No one's gonna tell you not to. And ask where you were all night. Moving on into our weekly poll. Chris knows what I'm talking about.
Please don't leave your thoughts on hold. Come on down to a weekly poll. Please don't leave your thoughts at home. Come on down to a weekly poll.
Just to follow up on that last thing that Christian threw in there, I love my wife. Welcome to the weekly poll, guys.
I love my wife, and I can see movies whenever. What was that, baby? What was that? No. I'm staying home tonight. No. I'll be home.
Welcome to the weekly poll, guys. You know what, guys? Last week, we were talking Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2 with the fantastic Bobby Katie. If you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to it because it was a great one.
What a fun, ruckus, good time that we had.
I know. It was a great Beers with Bros. We had a grand old time. But considering that we were watching Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2 and the discussion that we were having, we were very interested in hearing which volume you guys prefer as a movie. Kill Bill Volume 1, Kill Bill Volume 2. And you know what? This is the first poll we've ever had where the votes were unanimous. Unanimously, our listeners prefer Kill Bill Volume 1 to Kill Bill Volume 2. I kind of feel bad for Kill Bill Volume 2 because that's not a bad movie. It's a great movie.
Not at all.
But in our episode, the three of us said that if we were on a desert island, we would bring Kill Bill Volume 1 with us. Bobby was the only one that said he would bring Kill Bill Volume 2. But there's nothing wrong with that. How do you guys feel about this unanimous vote for the first Kill Bill?
We've clearly got our fingers on the pulse of our listenership, and for that, I'm very happy. I think, we spoke a lot on this on the last episode. I think it's something that you can rewatch multiple times. I think all of us had agreed that it's the one we'd come back to the most. Volume 2 has got the most heartfelt of both for sure, But in terms of just the pacing, the action, it's just it flies through, and it's iconic in a way that the second one just can't be.
Yeah, Christian, what are your thoughts?
You know, I can't disagree. This is what our opinions were. I share a lot of the reasons why, but yeah, I mean, all the iconic stuff that when you think of Kill Bill are I would say everything but the, as mentioned by Bobby, the breakout of the coffin scene and the ending scene with Bill himself. I think that most of the things you think of when you just think of Kill Bill are going to be from that volume 1. And if you just have to go rewatch one, if you're trying to have a good time and you're trying to get what Kill Bill does so well, and you're just trying to get that out of it, you're going to go to volume 1 for sure. Volume 2 starts off and it's just more of a not a think piece. I don't think I think that's a step too far, but it is more of a slow burn for sure. And I think it's great, and it makes Kill Bill volume 1 great. You know, to all of our points last week, and it's essential to the entire Kill Bill story, and it's best seen all together.
Absolutely.
And I was not disappointed with rewatching it, and so Kill Bill Volume 2 is great. But as with all the Tarantino movies that we talked about when we ranked them, you know, it's like picking your favorite child. They're all good. If you're into Tarantino, I mean, obviously, if you're not, there's some people out there. I've met them. They're not into Tarantino, and I get it. You know, you're entitled to your opinion. But when you like Tarantino, you tend to just be like, yeah, all his movies are very enjoyable. Kill Bill Volume 1, though. That takes the cake.
Thank you guys to everyone who participated in our weekly poll. As always, we have another weekly poll up on our Facebook page right now, so feel free to head over, search at Pop-O-Holics on Facebook, and you should be able to find it right there.
Chris, you're so good at hosting the poll section. I never regret giving you that responsibility, and just every time you deliver the poll, I just think to myself,
if you listen carefully, that little sound you hear is Oscar buzz getting louder and louder.
Just heart-wrenching performance.
So good. Thank you.
Guys, you can follow us on our Facebook, on our Instagram, if you search for @Pop-O-Holics. You can email us at popaholicscast@gmail.com. Let us know what you think of the show, any cool ideas that you have, anything you really love about the show, anything that you have some feedback about. We'd love to hear from you. We just love hearing from our audience. And rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcast. That really helps us out. Tell a friend. Share our post on the social medias. Really, really helps out. We appreciate you guys listening. And hope you're having as much fun as we are. When we come back on the show, we're going to be diving into True Romance, guys. I'm so pumped because I love this movie so much. And it's so cool that we have podcasts who get to talk about it. And I get to force you guys to talk about this movie with me. And I'm really excited to hear your experience watching this movie. It's going to be really cool. We're going to be talking about all that and more when we come back on Pop-O-Holics.
From the director of Top Gun and Beverly Hills Cop 2.
Hello, baby. Clarence? I'm a married man, buddy.
A con man.
Ask him if he got the letter.
Did you get the letter?
What letter?
He wants to talk to you.
No time. Tell him we gotta go.
A call girl.
Do you call for a date?
Huh?
I'm Alabama.
She a 4-alarm fire or what? She seems very nice. What are you doing in L.A. anyway, huh?
And a suitcase full of trouble.
My name is Vincent Cocotti. I work as consul for Mr. Blue Boyle, the man your son stole from.
Now, all that stands between them and their wildest dreams.
Find out who this wing and a prayer artist is and take him off at the neck.
That was from the very 90s trailer of True Romance. Directed by Tony Scott, written by Quentin Tarantino with a budget of $12.5 million, grossed $12.3 million, was a flop, but has become a cult classic. It stars Christian Slater, Patricia Arquette, Dennis Hopper, Gary Oldman, Michael Rapaport, James Gandolfini, Brad Pitt, Christopher Walken, Val Kilmer, Bronson Pinchot, and Samuel L. Jackson. He gets billing in this. He's in it for about 5 seconds.
Yeah.
Saul Rubinek, who takes the crown for greatest acting performance of all time, and Conchata Farrell. Who is Mary Louise Ravencroft? Which character is that, Chris?
You know, I was wondering the same thing. let's just scratch that.
Yeah, I have no idea.
Edit point.
What character that is. that might be a typo. I don't know. Someone's
I think it was
some hardcore True Romance fan who's more hardcore than I am is screaming at their podcast listener of choice. So what we're going to talk about is our first versus most recent viewing of this film, our favorite scenes. We're going to talk about one scene in particular, and we're going to compare this. You know, we did a whole month of Tarantino. We're going to compare this against the works he actually directed and kind of what his work looks like directed by somebody else. And what we might have been different if Tarantino actually directed this himself. And then our closing thoughts, and we'll close out the whole Tarantino month with our final thoughts on Tarantino as a whole. Before we get to that, though, I do want to mention I own the special edition director's cut DVD of this film, and it brought back this thing in my heart that brought me back to me as a high schooler going to Movie Stop, which I believe no longer exists. It might be like Blockbuster. There's probably one in Alaska that's left or something like that. And, you know, I was so excited because I sat down with my lady because this is kind of a fantasy romance movie. It's the fever dream of a teenager romance version. And I love this film to death. And this is one of the movies I saw and I was like, dude, I want to make movies like this one day. And I sat down to watch with my lady and I pulled out and she's like, oh, where's it streaming? I said, it's not. It's on this DVD. And I got to pull out the cover case and it's all like shiny with the Clarence, Alabama logo on it. And I put the DVD in and I booted it up and there's 3 commentaries from Tarantino, from Slater and Arquette, from Tony Scott, 3 separate commentary tracks. There's bonus features, alternate ending, and we pull this on and it's got this grain to it that you don't get with the digital. It really is true to the film of it. And the audio is a little better. It's a little more clear than digital audio. And I'm enjoying the heck out of just watching this DVD. And then halfway through it just stops playing and starts and it skips right to the end. So I find out that my copy of this DVD has most of the middle section of this movie is unplayable, at least on the older PlayStation that I was using, which I don't believe it has the highest grade DVD player. So it's possible that it's less obtrusive on other DVD players, but I ended up having to buy it on streaming service. I ended up buying it on iTunes. And, you know, it's to my chagrin. I get it. It's just the movie. It is just the movie. And it is insanely sad that we live in an age that it feels like the makers of this content can just upload it. And I did rewatch the half that worked. I watched the commentary for Tarantino. I didn't have enough time in preparation to watch all of them. I have listened to both commentaries in the past, and I've had this movie since childhood. Since I was a teenager, and really it made me upset that, you know, we like to think that, you know, a lot of the conversations around digital formats are saying that this isn't a permanent medium, and I'll tell you that there's nothing permanent about a DVD either. Unfortunately, I took very good care of that DVD, and it doesn't seem to have any damage to it, but it's still not playing for whatever reason. And it made me sad that it seems like it'd be so easy. This content is readily available by the publisher, by the distributor, and they could just hit upload and it's not, you know, you don't have to put that in 4K or HD. I don't care about that, but it's an audio file and a couple deleted scenes. Like, what? Come on. It makes me very, very sad that there's not more care that's put into these digital versions when you're paying, you know, the price you would pay if you went to a video store, or Best Buy or something, and got a DVD. So anyway, that was my little anecdote about my experience watching it and my nostalgia for old school DVDs and stuff. But I want to get into your guys' recent viewing, and if this was your first time watching it, or if your first time seeing it more recently. Brian, if it's okay, let's start with you. Have you seen this before, and what was it like watching it now?
So after talking to a friend of mine, I realized that we had started watching this movie, and I had quickly fallen asleep during the beginning of this movie and didn't remember anything about it because I was asleep. I'd watched like the first 15 minutes. So this was essentially my first actual viewing of this movie. And just to your point, I really thought you were gonna drive home this old head version that of physical media that I'm always pushing, and then he just drove it through my heart.
That ultimately it's flawed, just like everything in this world. Yeah, I'm sorry.
And of course it is, yeah. But I mean, they need to release those commentaries, even though I probably won't watch them because I'm a bad film lover. But so yeah, this is my first time seeing this movie front to back, and it's a wild ride. I don't know how to really talk about this movie. Hans Zimmer did the score for this.
It's crazy.
And I feel like
yes, he did.
It's absolutely absurd. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it's just actually bad. I don't think he realized. I think he thought this movie was taking place in the Caribbean. There's like steel drums that happen during all the quote unquote love moments. I'm like, what is he going for here? I don't get it at all. My friend that I watched it with, his dad was saying how Christian Slater just acts as Jack Nicholson in every movie he's in. In the first scene, he's doing so much with his eyebrows. We're like, oh my God, he is just Jack Nicholson. But I will say, after that first scene, I think he stands alone. He does his own kind of absurd style of acting that is not a full Jack Nicholson ripoff. I really enjoyed this movie. The soundtrack was the main negative. Tarantino is so written all over this, more so than even some of the stuff that he's written. Like having listened to interviews, the Sonny Chiba, the just the comic book references, even some of the dialogue. Obviously, actors as well who share a lot of stuff with his directed work. But this movie is just balls to the walls crazy. It's a love story where it's talking about a very strange type of love. But as you said, it's kind of like this young man's fever dream of what it means to fall in love and just have this like no holds barred romance. It's got some scenes that are very impactful. We'll talk about it a little later, but violence against women, this one may be one of the more uncomfortable compared to even stuff that Tarantino had shot. And I'm not sure I could have seen Tarantino directing this movie. I don't know how you guys feel about that, and we'll get into how it compares to his other stuff. But all in all, definitely glad I watched it. I'm not sure it's something I'd come back to often, but I really enjoyed it this time around.
You should come back to it often. I have taken a lapse and I haven't seen it in a few years, but man, it was a really great rewatch. Having not seen it forever, it being one of my favorite movies. Chris,
Sure.
tell us what your viewing experience.
So, Brian, I echo almost all of your sentiments about this movie. As it turns out, my first viewing experience and my most recent viewing experience are one and the same. This is the first time I've ever seen this movie.
I can't believe I've never forced either of you.
Isn't that amazing?
You are
It's
two
hard
of
to
my
believe.
longest friends that I've ever had. It's two of my best friends. This is
it's
not a fake thing. We
mind-boggling.
admit it. And I feel like I force every girl that I've ever dated to watch it, but I guess I'm not dating you guys, so maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I could say something right now, but I'm not going to say it on air. So
you were pantsless in my house.
well, I mean, that is a fact.
A story
However,
for another time.
yeah, that's neither here nor there. Christian. So, like I said, Brian, I echo like every single one of your sentiments. This movie is through and through Quentin Tarantino writing. Like, while watching this movie, Tony Scott barely has a fingerprint on this film. Like, Quentin Tarantino's writing just shines on top of everything else. You can absolutely tell this came out of his brain. To your point about Hans Zimmer scoring this film, I think the love theme with steel drum, xylophone, whatever it is it so perfectly juxtaposes like the insanity that's taking place in the movie. Like, it's so childlike and innocent and sweet. And like Christian said, this is like a teenage romance fever dream where like your first true love does initially feel like that, innocent, sweet, pure, and like they could have just shot somebody or like gotten the shit kicked out of one of them, and Hans Zimmer just starts playing this ridiculous love theme. and the weird thing is, having seen the imagery and then immediately hearing the theme, you're like, you know what? These two really are in love. I hope they succeed. Like, just you completely disregard whatever the fuck you just saw. It was fun. It was a fun ride. This is a blast to watch. It starts with a pop culture dissection, like quintessentially Quentin Tarantino.
That's your catchphrase.
Trademark.
Yeah, I've said that so many times over
every
the course of the last
episode.
2 months.
Yeah.
But it's like so Tarantino, him taking her to his comic book shop at night and then like showing her pages from one of his favorite comics and explaining this romantic moment, and her just like oogling at him and like falling in love. Like, it really is like a fantasy comic book nerd teenage romance. Like when I was a teenager, my God, what I would have given to like dissect a comic book in front of a girl and have her like absolutely fall in love with me. Crazy. The relationship between the two of them is just insane.
It's
and like
adorable.
completely it is adorable but completely unrealistic. The performances in this film are fantastic. Christian Slater does a fantastic job riding that line between like charismatic and insane, right? Like he has these weird breaking points where you don't even see it coming. Patricia Arquette is overall just like incredibly adorable. Like that's perfect casting for her particular role. Like this woman that he's just supposed to fall in love with instantly. Like absolutely, I challenge any man not to fall in love with that woman immediately, right? But you also have Gary Oldman, who does a fantastic job. He's not in the movie for very long, but
as
he
is
definitely
most of the players in this come in, give
Right.
an insane performance that is great, and then are just never seen again. It's incredible.
Yeah. But they're so impactful. Like they do the most with what they're given in those moments that they're shown on screen. Like I said, had a blast. Had a blast watching this.
I'm so glad you liked it. It's so amazing because it definitely. So again, I've said this on the last episode and in opening this. And this is one of my favorite movies of all time, and it's not because it's the greatest movie of all time. It is certainly not that.
Definitely not. It's just fun.
But in my young upbringing and getting into movies, this tapped into that just primal sense of being a nerd about something, nerding over something, and the heightened emotional resonance of falling in love and having this dream, not manic pixie girl. I don't think she's there. I think she's a very strong female character, as it turns out. I think she comes across at the start as oogly-eyed, whatever, just the yin to Terrence's, Clarence's yang. Like, just like she's just like oogling over him, but she turns out to be a very strong, independent person, like a very powerful person who reciprocates her love and shows that she's kind of in control of her own emotions and power, right? And I think that's a really surprising turn this movie takes. That being said, everything is completely unrealistic about it. It's just silly, but it's got all this like pizzazz to it. You got actors acting at the top of their game. And just seeing it as a young guy, it's like there's so much talent on display, and yet it's so silly and so fun. I watched this movie like a million times, and I kept coming back to it. It kept standing out as like, God, this movie just has so much like spice to it, and it's got that perfect blend of like 80s-ness to it with the gunshot sounds and the smoke. I mean, there's a shot where at the end where there's this big shootout, there's like this like beam of light shooting through a table for no reason. Like there's no natural light that would ever cause this dramatic thing, and it's just got this like this really unique thing. And it was different than Tarantino's movie because it actually moves at quite a rapid pace. You know, it doesn't linger a whole lot. I mean, I think in some of the
there's some scenes where it lingers a little bit, but like I agree with you, definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely got this more driving pulse to it that I think Tarantino doesn't have, and I think that's more attractive to a younger viewer. And it's just it's everything you want. Now, in the most recent viewing, there was a lot of like flaws in this movie that like I had never noticed about like how bad of a movie it can be at sometimes. And those stuck out more like sore thumbs than I think they ever have in my watching of it. So I will say that especially we rewatched all of Tarantino's films. And so the level of care that he takes with a lot of his work to make it so cohesive is not in this movie. Feels a little disparate in parts, and it feels like, but that's also kind of the charm of it, and that's like where I came around. Where I was halfway through this movie going like, oh man, this is not as good as any of Tarantino's movies. But at the end of it, I kind of sat back going like, yeah, but it's something different, and it's got this Tarantino like obviously bones to it, but it's also got this. It's the most unique out of any of the movies we talked about, and I thought this was an original thought from the very beginning. I said, oh my god, this is like the draft, and come to find out this is the first script that he sold. He gave Tony Scott a choice because Tony Scott really liked him and liked his writing. He said, you can either make Reservoir Dogs or True Romance, and I want to make the other one. You can pick whichever one you want. Yeah,
That's crazy.
Yeah, something you'd find out if you listen to the commentary that's only available on this broken DVD that I have.
I wish I had the commentary, man. I tried to find content with Quentin Tarantino talking about this.
Oh, if you've been a fan of the last episodes we've been talking about and you're a fan of Tarantino, it's quite amazing because it takes you back to the early part of his career. And it really isn't. There's so many great little anecdotes, and I just will reference you to. It's worth, if you like this movie, it is so worth getting this special edition DVD. To what I was saying before, there's these like, what I thought was an original thought was, I was like, oh my God, this is like the only time, even though Tarantino's voice is always evident in all the stuff that he does, Clarence was the first character that I'm watching and go, oh, that's Tarantino. Like he wrote himself and he wrote this fantasy for himself. I thought this was such an original thought and I felt so smart. And then from doing a bunch of research, so many people have made this point. So many people have put this because it is very obvious. I thought it was cool for recognizing it. But if I was to sum up this movie in just a phrase, it's, Alabama's, when she's talking about Clarence at the very end and she's thinking to herself in this narrative, when she goes, and I just thought, you're so cool. That is this movie. It's Tarantino being like, what is like the coolest thing I can do with what I love about film, and is this, and then he gets like Tony Scott, the director of Top Gun, to direct it, and it really is a special movie, and it still holds a special place in my heart. So let's move on to some of our favorite scenes of the movie and kind of break it down into to what we really appreciated. Maybe you can say performances or just scenes in general. Who wants to start?
I don't know if we want to go one by one, but I'll definitely start out with a couple. Samuel L. Jackson's scene in this movie with Drexel, where he is, spoiler alert, quickly shot and killed.
Disposed of.
He comes in and just starts talking about how any man who says they don't eat women out is a complete liar, and they have a whole discussion about it. And I was like, oh my God, this is so Tarantino. It's the foot massage thing from Pulp Fiction, and it was just so funny because even the guy's like, if I ever did that, and I never have, but if I did, I wouldn't tell anyone about it, as if it's something to be embarrassed about. And it's just so interesting how something like that, I don't know if you guys know about DJ Khaled, but he, in the last few years, had said that he doesn't do that, and he got roasted on Twitter. So it's something that's very much still with us in terms of, like, I guess pleasing a woman is something to be ashamed about. I don't know. It's so funny.
Weird.
But it's crazy how much that still held
Ladies,
up.
are you listening? Brian agrees with Sam Jackson. So hit him up.
All right. I will say one weird thing about because I actually bought a Blu-ray of this, and I think it has the commentaries as well. I got to double check on that. I haven't watched them yet, but he says he eats everything, like that and the butt, and the I think I said lyrics, but the subtitles said Bud, B-U-D, and I was like, what the hell is this? Is that like
that's a quick subtitle? That's a quick subtitle job.
Yeah, that was a really. It's like he's clearly saying "but" here, not a very important point there.
Interesting.
But this scene was so good.
Interesting part to that is that the only version that you can watch is the director's cut, which and part of that, from my understanding, was that they cut that scene back because the MPA. Listen to how ass backwards the MPA is, especially like in the early '90s. That was one of the scenes that they were like, you can't talk about doing that too much. It's like, what? Like,
wow.
You get so many times. Like, if it was a scene about like sucking penis, giving a blowjob, I guarantee in a rated R movie, it'd be like, okay, that's fine. But it's like, oh no, how dare we talk about like going down on a woman?
That's ridiculous.
But that was one of those things. And to the greater point of like, this film, definitely the director's cut is obviously the only thing that Tony Scott wanted anybody to see, because they probably had to cut back on a lot of the violence and a lot of those a lot of the dialogue to give it that R rating. And so every version that you see is actually a director's cut. So I don't think, because the first time I saw the movie was the DVD that I bought, and I downloaded the cut off line. It's the same exact running time, and from doing some research, it's like you can only find the director's cut currently or the TV edit, which I don't know.
That's really interesting
in a while.
Yeah, I was wondering about that because I was debating between buying a DVD, which I didn't know if it was the director's cut or theatrical, and the Blu-ray said it was director's cut, so I was debating, but I guess
if you find an old DVD, I believe, with the thing they currently have for online purchases, which is Terrence with a gun and Alabama next to him. Clarence. I keep calling him Terrence. Clarence with a gun and Alabama next to him in the doorway. If you find a DVD that's that cut, that might be the original theatrical, but I don't believe that's anywhere that you can buy like new or anything like that.
And that's the poster they ended up going with for the iTunes,
Yeah,
the digital version.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Yeah. Brian, what other scenes, performances that
So I'm going to transition right into another fellatio scene, and Elliot Blitzer driving along the road like a madman, getting a blowjob, getting pulled over, and the girl just throwing this bag of cocaine in his face as the cop is walking up. I was absolutely dying laughing here. And
which is such a pressure relieving scene because it's right after the scene where James Gandolfini beats the shit out of Alabama, and then Alabama lights him on fire, and it's like this.
It's a very weird transition. Like, it's a very hard transition.
It's a pure definition of how crazy this movie is that it goes from that into the scene that you're describing.
Yeah, for sure. So just his character is not someone that was particularly likable, and seeing him just get everything that was coming to him with how silly he's being in this whole situation, it was just hilarious to me. And then the cops, I'm pretty sure one of the cops that interrogates him did all of that cocaine that he confiscated from him, because he's just acting absolutely bonkers after that.
Tom Sizemore, I believe, is the actor's name.
Okay, yeah, Tom Sizemore. And the other guy is the guy from Reservoir Dogs, right? Who plays Eddie. Nice guy Eddie. I can't remember the name.
Penn. He's
Chris Penn.
Isn't he Sean Penn's brother?
Oh, I didn't know that. Maybe.
I have no idea.
I think it is. I think
they kind of look
Penn,
similar.
though.
Yeah, Chris Penn.
Yeah. So
you see a lot of like Tarantino actors in this film. So I feel like he was definitely on set, or maybe more involved than most writers would typically be, because he made all these connections, and then a lot of those moved over into Reservoir Dogs, and then kind of kept building with his other films.
Yeah. So last one, and this is just more of a single shot. I'm sure you guys will talk about some of the scenes that I've left out that are also really good. But in the final shootout, which I'm not going to go into deeply, Dick Ritchie throws all the cocaine up, and it gets obliterated as he just runs out of the room. And this is another just really silly, hilarious, and very intelligent in Dick Ritchie's to his credit. But yeah, I just thought that was such a funny and silly move.
Yeah, this movie's
definitely
fun and silly moves.
Ridiculous.
That scene at the end where the guy goes, Saul Rubinek goes, okay, the cops come in, and in like how you would normally write this would be the cops come in and it's like, okay, we surrender. Like, I'm just a movie producer and you've clearly caught me. But he's got these two ridiculous like 80s henchmen, and he's like, put your guns down. These are cops. And the guy goes,
there's something I forgot to tell you about. I hate cops.
Like, what in the actual hell? Where does that come from? It makes no sense that any character would be like, 6 cops to me. Guess it's time for vengeance. Like, it's so insane.
They do have bigger guns, to be fair.
They do. This whole sequence is actually one of my favorite scenes, because when he said that, I was like, okay, like, is he involved with the cops? Like, was he not hired by Lee? And it turns out that that's just a ridiculous fucking line. Like he wasn't acting or involved with the cops in any way. It was at this point at which I was watching the movie and I was thinking to myself, I feel like I'm just watching Quentin Tarantino play with action figures. Like, like the dialogue and the way the characters are acting, it's a Tarantino fantasy, man. Like, it was just weird to live in his brain for 2 hours, even more so than I think we have watching any of his directed films, which is kind of weird. You know, this is like the most Quentin Tarantino-y film I feel like we've seen.
Well, it seems like the most adolescent one, which is really fun to see someone this creative have such an adolescent fantasy. And you can see that within all the people love Clarence too. Like the director, or Saul Rubinek's character is just like, Clarence.
Like I said, he's super charming in this movie. He rides that line between charming and crazy. Like
Even
the scene in the elevator.
The cops,
Even the cops are like, I love this Clarence guy.
Yeah, this guy's hilarious. This kid's hilarious.
I want to go back to the scene in the elevator because this is something I didn't actually appreciate as much until this last viewing, which is when Elliot has the gun to his face. He goes, I wish somebody would just take me away. Dude, that had me rolling. That was so
perfectly
funny.
ambiguous too.
Yeah.
It's like,
exactly.
wow.
And you have the release of Terrence be like, I'm Clarence. God damn it. How do I keep messing this up? Of Clarence being like, I'm just messing. I'm so sorry. And he was so close to just giving himself up for having a wire.
That was a great scene. And that's exactly what I'm talking about with Christian Slater riding that line. Like, he turns on a dime. It took me a minute to realize what was going on because, like, not even the characters understand what's happening, right? Like, Christian Slater is in his head, or Clarence Worley is in his head for most of this movie, which, I mean, it's clearly apparent because he's hallucinating the ghost of Elvis, played by Val Kilmer. Like, when Val Kilmer was credited in the opening scene, I was like, where the fuck is Val Kilmer?
Yeah.
He's in 2 scenes in this, and they don't even show his face. They
Just
don't
like
even
the
show his
Mandalorian.
face, man. Like, but he's clearly has some like mental issues. As a
he's a
person.
psychopath. He's the straight
absolutely.
He decides he's going to kill, and there's like this moment where the fantasy and the reality meet, and it makes for like a really weird viewing, especially now as an adult. Like the scene when he goes and confronts Drexel, which is such a great scene. Gary Oldman is incredible. And when he was pitched the role, basically Tony Scott was like, so you're a white guy who thinks he's a black guy and you're a drug dealer. And Gary Oldman's like, yeah, I'll do it.
Sold.
And that scene's fantastic. Gary Oldman's amazing. He like leaps over the table in his underpants and grabs him. Right? But there's this moment with Clarence in which Drexel's been dispatched with. He's not dead, but Clarence takes a gun and shoots him like 3 times in the face. Like, Clarence is a psychopath, and he's hallucinating, and I don't know why. Maybe this is a problem with a developing brain, but I did not connect the dots of how absolutely crazy and psychotic that Clarence actually is. He's portrayed to be the hero and thinks he's the hero, but I mean, at the end of the day, he's lost his mind, and he's in very dangerous territory.
But I feel like that's very normal for like an adolescent brain.
Right, exactly.
Like you tend to romanticize the world around you, romanticize relationships, friendships, like reality in general. Like as a teenage boy, like you feel like you are the hero of your reality, right?
Mm-hmm. But we get kind of a peek behind the curtain, even though it's still and then maybe this is tonally where the movie kind of doesn't fully jive. Is like in that moment as an audience member, you're like, okay, that's a line. That's a line that you shouldn't cross. Like we still like him because Christian Slater's really great in this film, and him and Alabama are so their chemistry is clearly, and apparently they were having sex during this entire filming, and it's evident.
I believe it.
Yeah, they have such chemistry that you root for them, right? And you want them to succeed because the movie is effective at doing that. But there's moments like that where you go, okay, you're not in the best light here. You're definitely not a truly great character. You're flawed.
Yeah. After the Drexel scene, I turned to my friend. I'm like, they condensed Taxi Driver into 2 minutes, and then just made this scene, and then he's still the hero. Like,
and he's got the Travis Bickle bomber jacket, too. So
wow, I didn't even think about that. Okay,
They referenced Taxi Driver in the movie. The
Italians,
one of Christopher Walken's Italian, the mobsters in the film is staring in a mirror and going like, "Are you talking to me? Are you talking to me?" Like they reference the movie.
And I didn't think of it until a couple minutes ago, but they reference Apocalypse Now as well.
Coming home in a body bag is very much like the Apocalypse Now surrogate,
which is a fake movie, right? Is that a real movie?
Yeah, it's very
okay. Yeah, I figured so.
Yeah,
Coming Home in a Body Bag 2.
Yeah, the producer.
Back to the bag.
The producer goes, we were thinking about calling it a Body Bag 2. I've got like the tip of my penis has more inspiration. Yeah, it leaves a better
So
taste.
bad.
It's so great. There's so many. Oh God. Chris, what are some more of your favorite scenes?
So to add just a little bit more onto that first scene that I mentioned, and I have other favorite scenes as well. I love that we get a Mexican standoff.
Of course.
Of course, we get a Mexican standoff. Like Quentin Tarantino loves Mexican standoffs. Like,
He lives for them.
when it's the cops and Clarence and his like crew. At first, I was like, okay, this is kind of a Mexican standoff. And then the mobsters burst into the room, and I was like, "Oh, here we go! Like this is it."
Who are these
and
guys?
it's so long too.
It makes no sense.
I know it's
It
so
literally
ridiculous.
is so nonsensical.
But as far as like other scenes go, I really do like the scene where he takes Alabama into the comic book store. Like I can be a romantic, and like you said, Christian, the chemistry between the two of them is so strong. And it's just very sweet, and we've mentioned a couple times in the last 2 months how like genuine sweetness and love is something you've rarely seen in like a Quentin Tarantino piece. But just the fact that he's writing this, it impresses me, you know, because it's not something we see all the time. But on top of that, I really do like the opening scene in which he's talking about Elvis and rockabilly. And talking about how if he would ever have sex with a dude, he would have sex with Elvis, right? But the best part about that whole monologue is that after he sees the Sonny Chiba films with Bama, it cuts to a diner scene and he's finishing the same monologue. So clearly this like Elvis speech is a pickup line that he uses multiple times, because it cuts to them and he's like, "But enough about the king. What about you?" And I was like, that's genius. That's so funny.
Yeah, no, I didn't even notice that. That's incredible. That's a good find. Yeah, I think it is where all the problematic things of Tarantino, I think, always resolve really well because it's self-aware. Because in that first scene, he literally says, and I quote, he goes, I'm no faggot. But then he continues to go on and talk about how he's going to have sex with a man.
Right.
It is that juxtaposition between like, yeah, even in 2019 lenses, we look back and we're like, don't say that word. That's a very offensive word. But he's also like explains exactly what that slur is implying, is that he would indeed have sex with a man. I think that's always kind of the saving grace of Tarantino, and why he might age through the years, even as we look back and go, well, it's definitely on the edge, but I still think, we were talking about Dave Chappelle earlier, where it's like, yeah, you're writing that line really hard, like it's really hard, but I think at the end of the day, it is very much self-aware of even its own shortcomings in its characters. Like it shows flawed characters, and the reason it's brilliant writing is because it's not just that the flawed characters are heroes, like something that Michael Bay does, where it's like, oh, these characters are, this whole movie is going to exploit women's asses, but it's never going to be self-aware enough to know that it's doing it and comment on that, right? Where Tarantino's usually in the realm of at least commenting on the social thing that he's talking about. Anything else, Chris, on the scenes?
I think that I love that we get a Sonny Chiba reference, having just watched Kill Bill. Quentin Tarantino knows what he likes, man. Like he knows what he likes and he knows what he wants, and he's gonna put everything he loves in all of his movies or scripts. So it's just fun to, like I said before we started recording. Brian, I was telling Christian how I'm glad that he recommended we save this for last, because what that gave us was this fantastic perspective of who Quentin Tarantino is, and then to go back and see him in his early days before he was even directing but solely writing. It definitely like gives you a glimpse into his psyche and the type of person that he is, which was interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, no doubt.
I think some favorite scenes for me, I'm point out the James Gandolfini and Alabama scene. Again, Gandolfini having just one big moment, just like a lot like we get with so many other people with Oldman and Walken and Hopper. Just these come in, and that scene is very hard to watch, but it is just played so masterfully by Patricia Arquette and James Gandolfini. There's this little moment. It's these little touches that are just letting the actors do their thing, where when he asks he's kind of flirting with her, and he asks Alabama to turn around, and he like looks up really right before he hits her in the face. And you can just tell this man is unhinged, and he's not right in the head, and he's definitely scarred. And obviously he's talking about the first time he killed somebody, and then like honestly just toying with her in a really weird, perverse way. And then her comeback is so epic and feels so good to see. And she has almost this like Sigourney Weaver alien moment, because it's all smoky, in the room from her lighting him on fire, and she's just in her bra, and she's just shooting him with a shotgun, and there's a scene of her just screaming in the air before she starts pounding him with the shotgun. She's covered in blood, and I was like, oh my god, this is like it's like hot in a weird way. Like it's like a weird part of me. I was like, man, I'm really turned on, and I feel weird about it. But so much. Also, there's so much like female sexuality in that moment, but also so much female empowerment. I really love, and it's so silly. Like, it honestly is silly. Her just going like, ah! Like screaming with the gun in her hand. But man, like that was a climax for me of like, in the emotional stakes, in more ways than one. It's like an emotional climax of the movie that again is cut off immediately by the silliness of what happens. But it's really Brian.
No, I'm just sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Just the way that it's flashing back and forth with him going on about Elvis, like speaking about like all of these like pop culture things. They're in Los Angeles, and it kind of I don't want to compare it explicitly to David Lynch, but it gave me these like weird vibes of like, here's the surface level, he's critiquing society and things, and here's the underbelly that he's kind of still not fully come to terms with, that's been following him the whole time. And it brought such a disparity and made it even more visceral, cutting back to her just being, brutally attacked by Gandolfini.
Yeah, it's a rare moment in this movie where the fantasy is actually coming in conflict with the repercussions of their actions.
And as they're driving away, he's just apologizing to her, like I'm sorry when they're driving away.
Yeah, I do have to agree with both of you. Like, and Christian, to your point that this is like an empowering female moment for Bama. I agree with that. However, this is one of the most violent scenes in the whole movie, and it's the same thing that we've been talking about over the last 2 months when it comes to Tarantino. And that is, what is it about violence against women that he finds so I use the word attractive lightly, because I don't think that's the right word, but like, why is this a topic that keeps coming up so often in his works, writing and otherwise? What is it about it that he wants to say?
I think he's not afraid
and then, as well
to
as
watch people. Clarence gets the crap beat out of him by Drexel and his gang.
But it's not to this degree. And granted, like, Tony Scott, I'm sure, had a lot of say in the way that this scene was shot. Mm-hmm. Not as much as Quentin Tarantino had to say, because again, he was just the writer on this film. But like, this is undoubtedly the most violent scene in the whole movie. And why was that the choice? And was it written like that in the script? I don't know.
I think it's hard. It's there's some gross aspects of it. I think from doing some research in the filming, especially before these scenes, Tony Scott was abusive to Patricia Arquette, and like that's actually like documented and known. Like he would he would slap her and get her in the like trying to get her in the vindictive, angry, abused kind of perspective, and obviously that definitely doesn't age gracefully. And I don't think anybody should be privy to that on the set of a film. It sounds like it was a somewhat like consensual thing where she was like into the methodness of it, but it's still probably a line you shouldn't cross. So I'm not going to claim to comment on anybody's intent. It could be very cruel intentions, so I wouldn't claim to know that. I do like that these films are not afraid to have women struggle and actually violently get beat, because unfortunately it's a reality in our society that women get beat, and it's terrible and it's awful. And I think not acknowledging that happens and showing it is bad. Now, is there a level of like tactfulness? Like, I mean, you don't want to go Passion of the Christ on every girl in film. Like, you certainly don't want to do that. And I think, Passion of the Christ is a good example of watching a man, a spiritual figure, go through, like, most of that movie is torture porn to Jesus, which is very strange, and we could talk about that later at some other point. But like, that's a sign when it, like, I think that is too much, violence in the film, and it's distasteful in a not respectful way to that, right? And I think it can go a lot of ways. I think women were, as like, we're like, I think we're generally nice guys. We take care of our ladies, and we would never think of like hitting a woman. And to my knowledge, none of us are guilty of that. And it's something that I hold very sacrosanct. And me and Brian both have younger sisters. And, I think growing up with that perspective gives you a level of respect and caregiving to females. So I think it actually hurts more to watch women on screen get hurt. And I think it taps into a lot of masculine mentality of like, I think it actually is really painful to watch women get hurt as much. That being said, I don't think it should be taboo to do it, because it is a thing in reality, and it's a thing in storytelling. And so it needs to be a thing that in a free society and free art that expresses stuff that we should be able to do. Can we be critical of a director and say that it goes too far? Yes. In this particular scene, I think from knowing behind the scenes, it probably did go too far. I think it works for the movie, and it makes that feeling of her actually besting Gandolfini feels so much better, and one of the most powerful points in the movie for like a victory for a person. It feels way better than when Clarence kills Drexel. It almost feels like an execution. When Patricia Arquette's character kills Gandolfini, it feels like a victory, right? And so I think the movie ultimately works in the way for me, and every time that I've seen it. But as I'll say often, if it troubles you, I can't. Nothing that we say would take that away from you. So it definitely is on the line, which I think is it's pushing what you can do pretty far. So it's definitely up for debate. What do you guys think?
And so the movie does. No, yeah, obviously it's the kind of thing where if it was a one-off, then it'd be like, okay, like he's just trying to use it for the effect dramatically. But there is something weird about nearly every movie with women in it has scenes like this.
Every single one.
So it's a very strange thing. To your point about it being a real issue still today, Christian, 100%, like definitely agree. And this movie does do a little bit of like weird stuff where everyone who sees her and him together after that are like, what happened to you? Because she's wearing makeup, but she's clearly beaten, and they have to lie and say
she got in playing basketball.
Right. And so there's this kind of assumption that everyone's like, oh, he beat her. But it doesn't. Right. I think one person maybe does address it. I can't remember what character does, but for the most part,
it's Rappaport's character, his buddy in LA, and he has this look of like, and you can kind of see that's probably his best acting, where it's kind of like, well, I like my friend Claire. He has this like almost puppy dog look of like, well, my friend Clarence can't be beaten, right? He kind of portrays that really, really well.
Right. So it is saying a little bit something there. It could do more, especially I didn't know that about the director. That's clearly atrocious and unacceptable, regardless of how it came across, on screen. But yeah,
as for the overall thing, though, like you're saying, like it happens in every one. I don't know of a movie that I can't say that he unequally punishes women more than men. I mean, there's a scene. There's no violence against women in Reservoir Dogs, and he cuts a man's ear off and tortures the shit out of. Like worse, I think he gets tortured almost to the degree of the chick from Hateful Eight, right? And that's a particularly bad one, right? But he gets tortured to death. So there is a level of like Tarantino is just over the top violence, right? And I think the difference is that he does not differentiate if it's a woman or not, and he's not afraid to do that. So I would say in his overall work, he has been just as violent to men. So if anything, he's an equal opportunist.
Okay,
fair enough.
No, I can see that point as well, and I can see making that spin on it where like you said, he's equally violent toward men and women. However, I think he is more violent toward women more frequently in his writing. And I was gonna add to that like the violence against women, and also the unfiltered, unhindered ability to use racial slurs freely, consistently. those are two common things in all of his films, which it makes me wonder. I don't know Quentin Tarantino personally, obviously none of us do, but like it just makes me wonder why. And we've talked about that multiple times over the last couple months, and like we haven't pinpointed any one particular reason, but having seen all the films and then going back and watching one of his earliest works, it's like, oh, there's a through line here. Like there's something within him that makes him keep coming back to this stuff.
Sure. And then that kind of leads us into the most famous scene from this movie. If you look this up on the internet when you go to do it, it's like this is mentioned in the comments on YouTube and any of the movies or any of the videos about this film. This is one of the most searched and viewed scenes on YouTube. If you look at the iTunes copy of this, it's the first review talks about this scene, and that is the Sicilian scene between Christopher Walken and Dennis Hopper.
Now, if that's a fact, tell me, am I lying? Because you're part eggplant.
No! Hey. You're a cantaloupe.
You guys. It's beautiful.
So this scene is between Dennis Hopper and Christopher Walken. Christopher Walken plays Vincent Carcetti, who's kind of the main distributor to Drexel Spivey or whatever his name is, and he's looking for his big bag of cocaine that Clarence has stolen from him, and he's talking to Clarence's father, Dennis Hopper, about where Clarence has gone, and it is this breakdown of Dennis Hopper realizing that he's going to die and decides to use his seemingly useless information about the history of Sicilians in order to insult Vincent Carcetti before being shot to death by him. And it is a scene of two actors just being absolutely incredible. It showcases the very controversial yet cutting dialogue of Tarantino, over the top dialogue in a lot of senses, and ending in violence. So this scene encapsulates Tarantino's writing almost 100%. The only thing it's missing is probably beating a woman up. And besides that, it covers pretty much. It pretty much covers, or a man, again, equal opportunist.
What they do mess up Dennis Hopper a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, equal opportunist. This scene's almost probably too good for this movie. And I'm curious. You guys are watching this in 2019, and I know what the automatic jump to are, but I'm interested in your thoughts, and then I'm going to inform you of some information you might not know about the origins of the scene. So give me your hot takes on watching the scene. Does it stand out to you as one of the best in this film? And what are your thoughts on it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like I completely agree with what you said. Just being able to have Christopher Walken and Dennis Hopper sit down and just go, right? This is probably one of the few scenes in the movie where they sit and they just let two characters talk to one another. Because like we said earlier, the movie overall moves pretty quickly. Like we're getting to point A to point B pretty quickly. And for a 2-hour film, it flies by. But this scene in particular, they just let these two people sit and talk. And they both deliver great performances. I love the scene at the very end, or the moment at the very end of this scene, where Christopher Walken picks up the gun from one of his henchmen, shoots Dennis Hopper, and as he's shooting him, he's talking about how he hasn't killed anyone since 1984. So it's been like 9 years since this guy has had to kill somebody on his own. But Dennis Hopper got under his skin so well that like he broke his streak. I think that's great. Brian, what do you think about this scene?
So yeah, this is just quintessential Tarantino. It's
Would
so
you say
clear.
that it's
Quintessential?
Absolutely trademarked. So yeah, I will watch Christopher Walken say, "Whoa," just all
Oh!
day. And he's just perpetually amazing. It's it's what I love about Tarantino. He'll take these narratively meaningful moments and drop in knowledge on you that you would not expect to be informed of in a movie. To be honest, I haven't looked up the historical accuracy of what he's saying about the Moors here. And Christian, maybe you'll get into a little bit of the backstory of this. But yeah, they're back and forth. I watched an interview. It was like a set of clips with a bunch of the cast, which was all like 2 minutes each, where Dennis Hopper was talking about how they were really just playing off each other, like you said, Christian. Like a lot, it was scripted, obviously, but they were like, when they would laugh wasn't scripted, and they were just really playing off each other and letting the character moments really happen, and it absolutely shows. And just the whole thing about facial tics, and there's a little potential jab at women there, which is expected from Christopher Walken's terrible character there, about they have more tells, but that's probably based in something that has some level of reality to it as well, just about people in general, not necessarily men and women. But I absolutely love this scene. It works so well. And we had talked about PETA. Christopher Walken sends someone out of the trailer at some point, and I don't know what he's doing. Think he may have killed the dog. We don't hear any squeals or anything, but I'm sorry, folks. We don't hear any squeals. So for the people who don't want to watch animals get killed, it's not on screen. But I think that dog was also killed.
If there's anything worse than beating up a woman, it's beating up an animal. Like, and I've seen this with every girl that I've dated. If an animal is ever, like, you can watch a movie like John Wick, dudes just shooting men in the face and killing, irregardless of people's livelihood and everything. But the moment a puppy is in danger, it is, it's like the stakes are so much higher.
Yeah.
Like, get over it.
My wife and I, a little small digression here. My wife and I last year, we were watching Taika Waititi's Hunt for the Wilder People.
My wife and I last year killed a puppy.
Killed a dog. Small digression.
And we felt nothing. Absolutely nothing.
So there's a scene in Hunt for the Wilder People where this dog that's been following them around for a while gets like basically fatally injured by a wild boar protecting the two characters, and they have to put the dog down on screen. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie or not, but it's a Taika Waititi film, so there are a lot of laughs in it. But when this moment came up, my wife did not like it at all, and we almost had to stop the whole movie. So I totally get the whole do not harm animals on screen thing, because even I'm like, that's not cool, man. Don't do that. Don't show it to me. You know.
Well, if you ever want to make an audience, feel emotion for death, don't kill a person. Kill a dog. You know.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely.
100%. And I feel the same way. Like I'm saying all this, but I am not. I saw Hunt for the Wilder People. Fantastic flick. Go check it out. Taika Waititi making such a great movie. It's excellent. But yeah, that scene definitely. I was like, oh, the puppy dog is so innocent. He's just a puppy. Yeah, absolutely.
He protected them.
He was just trying to help. I say all this. I am a mess if I see an animal on screen. So
anyway, True Romance.
Anyway,
so just final thing about that scene. It's so serious. I mean, obviously he is murdered, and after this, he finds a way to go back to staying completely silly with the two Italian guys, one of which doesn't understand English, just like, what happened? And the other guy has to be like, he summarizes like, oh, he said Sicilians came from the Moors or whatever. I'm not saying the actual language used here, but I just thought it was so hilarious that you'd need a guy on screen to be like, oh yeah, you didn't know what was happening. This whole dramatic, ridiculous scene that you just watched.
Sum it up real quickly. Yeah, so this, what's really funny about this anecdote is that Tarantino, it is historically accurate. Not the tells. I think the tells is complete BS as far as like how many tells a man has. I think most science and like lying and stuff is like that show Lie to Me with Tarantino favorite Tim Roth. A lot of that show's BS. There's not, because if you're like a psychopath, you can lie without any tells and all this other stuff. So that's pretty BS. But the story of the Moors and the Sicilians is 100% true. And I believe Tarantino shouts out a movie with Sidney Poitier. What's that actor's name? and I'm jogging this really faint memory, but there's a movie that actually goes into the story of the Moors. But all that aside, this was a story that was told to him by an older black guy that he grew up with that told him this story all the time. And it was like, hey, when you hear something about like Italians, like this is the story of the Moors, and he had heard it over and over again. And he was at a conversation with somebody, and he just like whipped this out in a Tarantino style of the story from his friend. And he goes, oh, that'd be great for a movie. And he put it into this one. And so the story itself, in the way that it's told, is Tarantino's interpretation of a story told to him by a friend of his. And it again, one of the things that is like writing that line, but also very self-aware, is that the story itself is a pretty racist story, because the way that it's told, it's almost like this lesser people infected,
right,
and infiltrated your people and diluted your bloodline.
Right.
But that story is only impactful if the recipient of the story is himself racist. And so it's this cycle of he's using racism to pull out the racism of the person he's trying to piss off. And so it is definitely not clean. It's definitely not like it's definitely not a story that I'm going to tell to my kids, but it is reaching a deeper truth about people's pride in their heritage, and any idea that it would be not a pure bloodline, it would be offensive to them, right? And so I think that the story at the end of the day, points out that this human condition, and then of course it's a really interesting story. It sparks conversation. It has you look up the actual historical accuracy of this. Me being a quarter Italian, I find it very interesting. And it's almost like it's in the middle of this movie, and it's almost like the movie never hits this artistic of a high throughout this entire thing.
Yeah.
But I think this scene stands alone and is a definite like screenwriting 101. Getting good actors, good direction, and then on top of that, it's got Tony Scott's flair on it, which is what's going to lead us into our next conversation, which is like, what's the difference between this movie and Tarantino's self-directed movies? Like it's like smoky in the scene, like Tarantino never adds this much smoke. It's in the middle of the day, yet it's completely dark. Again, the gunshots are like when he's shooting, you get this like close up of the gun that Tarantino would never use, this kind of style. And so again, it places it uniquely in Tony Scott's vision of Tarantino's script. So what are some things that stand out to you guys, obviously, about what differentiates this from Tarantino's self-directed stuff?
I think the thing that stood out to me most kind of falls in line with what you were just talking about, Christian, and that's the way that the cinematography is composed in this film, right? Like we don't get any interesting one shots. We don't get any crane shots. None of the scenes are staged as if we were watching a stage play. Like Quentin Tarantino takes a lot of time, and not to say that like Tony Scott and the cinematographer for this film aren't like artistically capable. It's just a different style, right? Quentin Tarantino takes more time to set up cameras, I think, and really develop like a unique vision for all of his movies. I've said multiple times throughout the last 2 months that a lot of his films kind of feel like graphic novels when you're reading them. And that's just not Tony Scott's style, So I think that's the biggest difference between these two films, is the way in which we are shown the images. But that's not to say that this film is lesser by any means.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with that. And as far as the cinematography, because maybe it's as much the writing as it is the scenes itself, but it seems like the pacing is just completely different than most of Tarantino stuff. I think you brought that up a little bit earlier, Christian, the dialogue heavy scene. So it's cool how Tarantino can write something that can be shot in this way, and it shows that he's maybe even more diverse as a writer than I generally give him credit for. I watched a short interview where he was talking about his one initial pet peeve with this movie, and in And we haven't even talked about stoner Brad Pitt, which is just absurd and hilarious, who is actually a surprisingly major player in the plot. He's just pointing all the bad guys to the main characters constantly, which is silly.
Get some cleaning products, man.
Yeah, like, and beer, more beer. Floyd smoked the second page of the letter. One of my favorite lines. But yeah, Tarantino's talking about how their apartment, these two broke guys, one of which doesn't have a job, one of which is a non-working actor, and they have they have $2,000 worth of framing of movie posters in their house that they couldn't afford, and they wouldn't like any of these movies either, except there's one movie that I can't remember off the top of my head. He's like, this was the one movie where it's like, okay, these two guys would probably like this one, actually. So to your point, Chris, it's like Tarantino is such a, character driven, all the details are relevant and matter, even if you don't pick up on them, that Tony Scott is not as interested in as maybe the atmosphere and smoke machines. I'm not sure.
It shows you how true of a character to himself Tarantino is himself.
Right.
Where you look at True Romance, and we're going to discuss all the differences, and we have a lot of varying opinions of man, Tarantino would have never done this, that, and the other. Tarantino looks at this movie, and his anecdote is on YouTube. We'll try to link it in the show notes. And he goes I just really don't think the posters in their room would be the kind of posters that you'd have as those characters. And we're like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's what you paid attention.
That's not how I would have dressed the set.
You're not going to mention the goddamn Aerosmith, blasting at full volume and all the goddamn smoke, everywhere.
No, exactly. And that leads into, I brought it up earlier, but the music. There was a couple times when I felt like the music was working for me, and I think only one instance of diegetic music when they're in the car and they turn it off. It may have been that Aerosmith track, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, Christian. But Tarantino seems to be much more involved generally in his musical cues and everything, and the music very much threw me off. And to your point, Chris, I guess if it was intentional, then maybe it can work, but it just, in terms of how well Tarantino generally uses music, this did not even stand up, not even close.
Not to be the diegetic music nerd here, Brian, but I can point out the I believe Soundgarden song or Perfect Circle song that Floyd is listening to while he's getting stoned at one point. I believe when the mobsters all show up. Also, the opening shot has diegetic music playing in the bar, and the opera theme in classical music that's playing during the Sicilian scene is coming out of Christopher Walken's ass.
Hey-o.
I don't know how I didn't realize this.
It's all on the page. I'd have to agree with you. I think honestly, other than the overall very 80s-ness, it feels like Top Gun and Beverly Hills Cop 2. It's got this 80s sheen to the entire, and I'm not talking Charlie or Martin here. Has this overall gloss to it, and the sound effects, especially. I don't know what it is about the sound effects, but they sound so damn 80s. And it's weird because it's like Tarantino's new indie cinema grit, a style that would be copied on till now, that's propelling it. The blood of it is this new wave, gritty 90s pop culture self-referential driving force, yet it's got this weird 80s sheen all over it, and I think the most blatant is the music. I think that's where it doesn't vibe. I'd have to agree. I like Hans Zimmer's score because it is this, at the heart of the movie is the romance, right? And the movie's called Romance. I believe they wanted to call it, the studio wanted to change it to Reckless Hearts or something. What a terrible title that would have been.
Yeah,
oh my gosh.
Ugh, gross.
Not to say these two lovers are not reckless.
No, it describes it well.
True Romance is way better.
I can see how some jackass in marketing was like, we gotta call this flick is Reckless Hearts because they're in love and they're reckless. It just doesn't have True Romance is so perfect.
Dangerous couple.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
let's really drive it home.
At the heart of it, I don't think any of this works if the first opening scenes don't work and establish the chemistry between the two, and you're like, yeah, these are just two young, stupid kids in love, right? And that's what drives the Bonnie and Clyde-esque adventures, right?
Stupid kids in love.
Yeah, you can think of a
Another
million titles
title
that describe it better than True Romance, but are not as good as titles. But yeah, I think and so I love the fact that Hans Zimmer theme is always reminding us that it's like that's what they're feeling is this do 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 do, you know, and it's like so memorable. It's like it's right there, and it keeps coming up as like, oh yeah, that's right. It's like these kids are like, oh, we're gangsters, pow pow pow, you know, and that's what they're feeling, and then the reality of it comes in. So I think Hans Zimmer's score, which is pretty much what I just did, is I think all Hans Zimmer did for the most part. I think what stands out is all the other music. I think there's a couple great hits. The hey there, that like it's not Elvis per se, but
that's amazing.
Yeah, that's so great, and that's working really well. And that seems to me that would be a Tarantino choice that he would use and integrate into the scene. The Aerosmith, the techno playing in Drexel's place, although I think it fits for the way that it's shot, it's still very, very out of place. And you'd think that you'd have something that would, you know, I feel like Tarantino would be like, all right, Drexel's this guy that's posing as something that he is inherently not. You know, how do we describe that better? Or what would he be listening to? And I think those are the kinds of things that Tarantino thinks about a little deeper. And so I think, yeah, I think the pop music that's pooled is a misstep in a lot of this stuff, and that really stood out on this rewatch to me. So you know, other than the superficial stuff and the style and like you said, the pacing, I think where it hurts the film the most, like that's the most obvious, and I think that's what makes this movie kind of cool and interesting, is that we get a separation from Tarantino as a director. I think where it hurts is the music, 100%. That's
agreed.
That's where the biggest pain points are. All right, so you know, we've been going long, so I do want to be thoughtful of your time, guys. So let's close our thoughts on True Romance and then on our Tarantino month. So let's start with True Romance. Anybody got any closing thoughts?
I'll just start by saying, having never seen this movie, and having now watched all of Quentin Tarantino's filmography, if you haven't seen True Romance, do yourself a favor and go out and see it. We've spoiled everything in this episode, so this is probably the wrong time to say go out and watch it now that you've listened to the whole thing, but it's definitely worth a watch, without a doubt.
Yeah, totally agree with that. This movie has, in the opening credits, you're like, how in the hell can all of these gigantic actors be in this movie? And somehow they pretty much all get to do their thing, even if it's only a few minutes on screen. You get all of these amazing performances. You get Gary Oldman doing, I don't know if you guys have seen Spring Breakers, but James Franco being Riff Raff, which I feel like Riff Raff is just a version of Gary Oldman's character in this movie. I don't know if you guys know Riff Raff, the guy that he's playing off of in Spring Breakers, but it felt like, wow, all of this just feels so modern still in a strange way. But all the performances, this movie is ridiculous. Patricia Arquette, you mentioned it earlier. She's perpetually cute and adorable, and also a badass, as we see, who's hardcore, you know? So a little bit Manic Pixie Dream Girl-ish maybe, but definitely works well, and Christian Slater is giving it his all. I haven't seen him in anything except for Mr. Robot, which it was kind of felt very meta to me that we have a character named Elliot in this movie. He, you know, imagines Elvis. He has like a split personality mentor Elvis, and I was just like, okay, I don't think this is referenced in Mr. Robot, but it felt strangely relevant given that's the only other thing I'd seen him in. But agree 100%. You guys should watch this movie. It's a fun ride, especially if you are at all interested in Tarantino.
Yeah, and I think that's why this movie remains one of my favorites. It's a weird thing in pop culture. It's a very, very strange, unique beast, and it's just so much fun. And you can tell this had like a really good bones to it from Tarantino, and it feels like all the actors, Scott himself, everybody's just having a good time. From everything I've researched, it was kind of a party on set, and you feel that. It feels like a just super fun, cocaine-fueled fantasy, you know? And so it is a really unique piece of pop culture, and it's definitely, you know, especially the more I watch it, the more I'm like, man, this movie is lacking in so many areas of being like just a great film. But I think for a unique little, you know, butterfly of a picture, this remains one of my favorite, like tonally a mess. It's like chaotic. It's chaotic evil is what it is. It's like it's super fun. It's super dark, super gritty. Definitely something that if you're like into film and you're a teenage boy like I was, it's just like the perfect movie for like a 16-year-old, 17-year-old guy. And I do find that, like, you know, I've watched it with my girlfriend. She liked it plenty. I think there's enough fun to go around, ladies, if you want to join in. It's a good time, but I do believe it taps into something very immature.
Masculine.
Yeah, and it more on the cautionary tale of like immature masculinity. Like I would not blame anybody for looking down on me for liking the movie as much as I do be like, you're a man child. I'd be like, yes, this movie is proof that I am a man child. And maybe I'm gauging my maturity by how I see this movie as I grow up. Like I think this was the first time, if I could speak to my development as a human and how this movie impacts me, this movie, I finally saw it for what it was, this most recent viewing, and I still enjoy it. But I do feel like a piece of me that enjoyed this movie more has grown up a lot. And so this movie has been a good litmus test for how I've aged as an adult. But still not being like ashamed per se. Like I still look back with fondness, but can understand the inherent flaws of this kind, like of why this movie tapped into me so much. I can kind of digest the negative, like almost the I don't want to say maybe animalistic, but very immature, base level masculine things that drive a person like me to like this movie and identify them as traits. I don't know if that makes any sense.
Sure.
And you know, this movie portrays this, and I was listening to the Empire Film Podcast, which we've talked about its praises. So such a good podcast, and they get stellar interviews.
Yeah.
This one not long enough, but there is a Once Upon a Time in Hollywood spoiler special in which they talk to Tarantino for about 40 minutes or so. And one of the things he points out, which I'm ashamed that I did not realize, and this movie portrays it as well, is that all of his movies always have a moment or several moments in which characters are pretending to be someone else. And it really plays into a lot. I mean, from Reservoir Dogs, you have that scene which stood out to me. That's how we kicked this thing off, was watching Tarantino's directorial debut, his first written stuff brought to picture. And the scene that stuck out the most to me during that, and I talked about it, was the scene where the cop is talking to Tim Roth's character and talking about how you act, like in B. And I think I mentioned something about this, like I was right on the edge of identifying this as a running theme. And that runs true through this movie with Elliot, who is an actor, having to act, and the cops being like, "You gotta act, right?" And you know, in Hateful Eight, it's all about a group of gang members trying to act. And I find that so funny that it parallels Tarantino's history of like the best thing that he's ever given us is he's given like the juiciest dialogue. He has Christopher Walken say in this movie the following, which is, you only give this to someone who can deliver. I am the Antichrist. You got me in a vendetta kind of mood. You tell the angels in heaven you never seen evil so singularly personified as you did in the face of the man who killed you. You don't give that line to someone who cannot perform
just anybody.
it.
Yeah.
To just anybody, right? And so Tarantino exemplifies being able to build relationships with actors and get people excited about a project and really get something special out of actors. And I think when Tarantino's made his 10th film, or his 11th or 12th film, whatever, and has stopped doing it, and when he passes, I think forever he will be remembered as someone who focused on the art of acting as a analogy through his stories, and the analogy of people pretending to be people they aren't, and getting actors really excited and being able to have fun and deliver memorable performances. I think that will forever be his legacy. And I do think in this movie in particular, it shows Tarantino trying to be something he's not, being a fantasy. This movie almost encapsulates Tarantino himself, pretending to be somebody that he is not. Like, it has traits of him, has attributes, but it is a psychopath version of himself, where he's able to live out his violent romantic fantasy.
Yeah. Completely agree. And I think we've even said it a couple times over the last 2 months. We're like, basically to sum up what you just said, he is an actor's director, right? Like, he is there for them. And because of that, he's able to get the best performances out of them.
And it even shows that when he's not directing, his scripts can bring things out in actors that just give good performances, you know?
Yep.
It's clear. It's clear, very clear here.
You know what I'm noticing too? I'm looking at all the IMDb quotes. James Gandolfini character says, "Now the first time you kill someone, that's the hardest. I don't give a shit if you're fucking Wyatt Earp or Jack the Ripper." And I just realized that Tombstone, the movie that I've been watching, is about Wyatt Earp. It's a real character.
Wow.
Full
circle.
Full circle of life. Guys, anything else on our Tarantino month? All I can say is I've had a lot of fun. This has been
It's been a blast.
For me, I love Tarantino. I'm a Tarantino head. I'm one of those guys that if you say you don't like Tarantino, I'm not going to get mad at you. I'm going to understand. There's lots not to like about him, for sure. But as someone who's like, when you're coming up in the, like I did, early 2000s as a teenager, when you're getting into film, he was kind of the end-all, be-all. Like, you can be like, if you put your mind to it, you can create something cool. This is someone that's just like you, who's nerdy like you, who can create something cool. So it's been cool to go through it and see his evolution and tie it back in with this.
Christian, it's interesting that we covered Tarantino the last 2 months, a director that has inspired you, and an indie director that's inspired you, and it seems to be the catalyst almost for like why you enjoy film. And next month we are covering a director. Not to say that Quentin Tarantino hasn't done that for me, but next month we're covering the director that basically did the same thing that Quentin Tarantino did for you, for me. I just find that to be interesting.
Kevin Smith, guys. Kevin Smith. Spoiler alert.
I was gonna let Christian announce it, Brian.
He threw up the softball. I was swinging. If I had to say,
I can't let Tarantino go.
To Tarantino, I would say, "You're so cool." That's it.
He is
That's it,
so
man.
cool.
That puts it into perspective. Next, as you were alluding to, Chris, next month we are talking about the one, the only, the overly verbose Kevin Smith. Someone would say a poor man's Tarantino. I don't know.
You know what? Tarantino had a huge influence on Kevin Smith. Like, Kevin Smith wouldn't be doing what he's done if it wasn't for Tarantino. So Tarantino overall has influenced all of us, and thank God for him.
And what movies are we covering from him? Just so we can get the listeners prepared if they want to catch up before next month's.
So we are going to be to celebrate the release of Jay and Silent Bob Reboot. We're going to be covering all of Kevin Smith's View Askew films. So that's Clerks, Mallrats, Chasing Amy, Dogma, Jay and Silent Bob, Strike Back, and Clerks 2.
How many weeks are in next month?
We're doubling down on some weeks. So
Yeah, we're doubling down
it's
on
just
some.
It's 4 episodes.
I didn't get this. Wait, let me check the schedule. This is obscene. You're going to make me watch this much Kevin Smith?
We're going to be talking about Dogma and Jay and Silent Bob in the same episode if things
Guys,
play out. It's
gonna
going to be
interesting.
absurd.
Guys, so we've come together to announce the end of the Pop-O-Holics podcast. It's been
It's all
so
over.
what a fun ride. Almost made it a year.
God damn it.
I guess we're gonna have to cut it short.
You were looking forward to 50, Chris, but
We're not
just
gonna
couldn't
make
get
it.
there.
With bonus episodes, I got a lovely from our podcast distributor. I got a lovely email saying you hit your 50th episode last week. That does not count. That's our bonus. That's with our bonus episodes. But our 50 official will come with Kevin Smith. 100? Who knows? Stay tuned, listeners. We'll see. Guys, thank you so much for being here. It's been so cool talking about True Romance. It's like, this reminds me of why we're doing this podcast and what reinvigorates me even when I'm super tired and got off a work week and ready to call it quits on life. We get to this, we get to talk about True Romance. It makes me really excited. And then I have to do a month of Kevin Smith. And hopefully, I'll definitely try to find some joy in covering it. I don't want to spoil my thoughts for Kevin Smith. So we'll see. I don't hate Kevin Smith. It'll be a lot of fun to revisit a lot of that stuff and rediscover why he's influential and all that good stuff. I'm looking forward to it. Guys, thanks for being here. Brian.
I don't know if this is still official, but I believe our good friend and multiple guest of many times on the podcast, Marcus Griggs, is going to be joining us next week.
I heard a little birdie tell me that.
He will, yeah, to help us discuss Clerks.
The first inception of Kevin Smith, his credit card fueled, inspiring tale of making an indie film. It's going to be really cool to revisit that. I haven't revisited it in a few years. I've seen the movie a couple times. It is definitely going to be interesting to revisit that. If you haven't seen it in a while, guys, catch up and listen along with us when we talk about it next week. For all the Pop-O-Holics cast, thank you so much for joining in again. Follow us on all the social medias. Email us at popaholicscast@gmail.com with any feedback. This is Christian signing off saying happy Wednesday and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thanks for listening.
Consume consciously, everyone. Nailed it.